Hello everyone, and today I am finally talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and did it live up to the hype? Absolutely. Now that I've seen it a few times, and that it's been over 2 weeks since it came out in theaters, I think it's safe for me to talk about spoilers, but if you haven't seen the movie yet, click off this video, go check it out, and come back when you're done. Trust me guys, this is worth seeing on the big screen. The plot is that it takes place a year after the events of the first movie, with Miles, still a Spider-Man, trying to keep the city safe while trying to balance out his superhero life with his real life, until he encounters a villain known as the Spot, who says that they are both responsible for their own powers, and has a grudge against Miles. While that's happening, we get to see what's happening in Gwen's universe, where she's trying to deal with her issues as Spider-Woman, until one night she fights the Vulture from a different universe, but also encounters 2 other Spider people. The first one is Spider-Woman, aka Jessica Drew, but to make it more easy to differentiate the two, I'm just going to call them by their first names. And she also meets Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099, who is the leader of the Spider Society. Their mission is to make sure that the multiverse of Spider people is the way it's supposed to be, and doesn't go off course in fear that it could disrupt the multiverse. So think of it like the TVA from Loki, except they don't retcon previously established material. She is allowed to join the Spider Society, and one of her missions is stopping Spot because he is able to go to different dimensions, and it's causing him to be more powerful. So Miles tags along, and along the way, they encounter characters such as Spider-Man India and Spider-Punk, until they go to the Spider Society and we learn the truth about Miles' origin. So that's the plot, and honestly, it's really good. What helps out the plot is the pacing of this movie. Despite being 2.5 hours long, I never felt the runtime because of how compelling it is. One thing I love is how the first act is a massive parallel between Miles and Gwen. Think about it. It starts off with both of their origins, then we get a scene with them talking to their parents, where they're both called to superhero action and their dads are called to stop the supervillain as cops, and then after the action they have a conversation with their parents where we get to see a different sides to it. You see, Captain Stacy believes that Gwen killed their version of Peter Parker, but it was an accident, whereas Miles and his dad are working together. And even after we go into the Spider-Verse in the second act of the movie, the plot is still engaging, but I'll talk about that more in the character segment. Now let's talk about my issues with the movie. Yeah, not much. My only issue is that I do understand the criticisms with this movie ending on a cliffhanger. Now, while yes, I knew this was going to be a part 1 of 2 movies, I do understand the criticisms because that means that the first act of part 2 is going to have to deal with the ending of this movie before resolving the plot of the trilogy. But even so, it doesn't bother me as much because the rest of this movie is so fantastic. So before I continue the review, I just want to talk about my favorite cameos in the movie. Starting off, this movie actually confirmed a headcanon of mine, where when I was rewatching the previous movies and I got up to No Way Home, I thought to myself, imagine how funny it would be if in every universe, J.K. Simmons was J. Jonah Jameson, and this movie confirmed it. But for some reason in the LEGO universe, they just reuse audio from Spider-Man 1 and 3, when they could have just had J.K. Simmons re-record the lines. I mean, you had him speak new dialogue in this movie, so why not just do that? But still, it was nice to hear his voice again. I also really liked the Insomniac cameo, because hearing Yuri Lowenthal voice this character in a movie, even if it's just for a line or two, was pretty nice, and I also loved the Spectacular Spider-Man cameo. Hearing Josh Keaton reprise his role after so many years was so much fun, and the scene itself is pretty haunting to think about, considering this version of the character. And I also liked how they reused footage from the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield films, and even though it's just reusing footage, the way it's done really benefits the story. Now, let's talk about the other details, starting with the animation. Okay, what can I say that hasn't been said already? This is one of the best, actually scratch that, this is probably the best looking animated movie I have ever seen on the big screen. Much like the first movie, I love how it's able to blend all these different art styles into one movie and nothing feels out of place. Even in scenes which are just quiet character moments, the animation still looks fantastic, and during the action, I was blown away by it. On my first viewing of this film, I genuinely had to ask myself, is this even real because of how fantastic the animation is during the fight scenes? And speaking of the action scenes, all of them are fantastic. You have the opening fight scene between Gwen, Jessica, and Miguel versus a Renaissance vulture. Then you have all the action scenes with a Spot, which is just a treat for the eye, especially in the Mumbattan fight, and of course, the final battle where every spider person is chasing after Miles, which starts off with some pretty good humor until it gets really serious near the end with an explosive finale. Then you have the characters. To start off with the ones I don't have much to say, Spider-Bite was okay. There was one scene towards the end that I really liked with her, but not much I can really say. Then you have Jessica, who was also just fine. There is a scene halfway through the film that I really liked between her and Gwen, but yeah, not much I can really say about her. Then you have Scarlet Spider. Now, while yes, I haven't read the comics, I do know he is a clone of Peter Parker, but I can understand why people aren't happy with the way he was portrayed in this film, since he's mostly here to make edgy jokes, which, yeah, isn't all that funny, but the one at the end I thought was pretty good. Then you have Pavita, aka Spider-Man India, and if I mispronounced his name, I do apologize, and Hobie, aka Spider-Punk, who are mostly here for comedic relief, much like Ham, Penny, and Noir in the first film, but they also do have their emotional scenes, which work really well. While Pavitra definitely got some good chuckles out of me, it was Hobie that stole the show in terms of comedy. Every joke from him was hilarious. He is as funny as Noir from the first movie, and I hope that in Beyond the Spider-Verse, Punk and Noir get some good comedic interactions with each other. Now let's talk about our villains, starting with the Spot. Now, I never heard of this guy until this film came out, and I was absolutely blown away by his inclusion in this film. You know how earlier I said that he claimed to have caused Miles to become Spider-Man? Well, it's revealed that while he was testing out Kingpin's collider in the first movie, it brought in a spider from a different dimension, escaped his lab, and bit Miles in the first film. And at the end of the first movie, when the collider exploded, he was caught in the blast and is what he is now. One thing I like about the Spot is that he is a villain who goes through an underdog story, starting off as a villain who can't even rob an ATM properly, and it's done in a pretty funny way, until he becomes a threat to the entire multiverse. And his progression is all done naturally, and while yes, he does leave halfway through the film, I'm still excited to see what's going to happen to him in Beyond the Spider-Verse when him and Miles fight again. Then we have Miguel O'Hara, who is just as interesting as the Spot. What makes him an interesting character to me is that, while yes, you do disagree with his actions, you do understand where it's coming from. The reason he dislikes Miles is actually pretty interesting in my opinion, because he messed with the timeline himself by going to a different dimension to take the place of a different Miguel who was killed and be there for his family. However, it caused that universe to get destroyed, with Miguel surviving, and one thing I like is that it does show what would have happened if Kingpin's plan from the first movie actually succeeded. And even though you sympathize with him, you also still are able to disagree with his treatment towards Miles. And I will say this, Oscar Isaac, hands down, in my opinion, gave the best performance in the entire movie. He was just phenomenal in every scene he was in. Then you have Peter B. Parker, and while yes, he doesn't have as much screen time as he did in the first movie, I honestly didn't mind that. Every scene he was in, he was a ton of fun to watch, and I'll be honest, after the first movie where he went through a midlife crisis after a string of horrible events, seeing him happy that he has a kid and he's married to MJ made me so happy for the poor guy. And there's also a really nice scene between him and Miles in the climax where he does show that mentorship that he had in the first movie. Gwen is just as likable as she was in the first movie, but here we get to see more of her backstory and the pain that she has been going through after the loss of Peter Parker. What doesn't help, however, is that much like what I said earlier, her dad is leading a manhunt to capture her because he thinks that she is responsible for the death of Peter Parker. And even though they do tease a romance between Gwen and Miles, I do like how Gwen brings up that in other universes, Spider-Man ending up with Gwen Stacy doesn't always end well. And I also really liked her ending, but I'll save that for later. Now we talk about Miles. What I love about Miles is that much like Peter Parker, you can relate to him. You see in the first act how he's struggling to keep a normal life with his family while also trying to be Spider-Man and how it interferes with both sides. What makes Miles relatable is his courage. When Miguel tells him that his father has to die in order for the multiverse to be safe, Miles decides no. He wants to find a way to save both his dad and the multiverse, because think about it. Imagine if you were told in order for the multiverse to be safe, your dad had to die. Wouldn't you try to figure out a way for both things to be okay in the end? And even with the Spider Society chasing them, he still finds a way to beat them by using his intelligence, not his raw strength. And one detail I absolutely love is that when Miguel calls him a mistake, you see a quick flash of him in the spider costume from the first movie. It really goes to show how far he's grown over the course of these two movies. And at the end of the movie, when Miles is sent to the universe where his spider was originally supposed to be, you see what could have happened if Miles was never bitten by the spider. In this universe, because of this universe Miles not being bitten, he's the Prowler and his dad is dead. Something that was brought up to me that I didn't even realize was that in the first movie, when Peter senses Miles, it starts off with him having the background colors of the Prowler before being transitioned into the Spider-Man color scheme. So, pretty much, now after watching this movie, whenever I go back to that film, it's gonna feel a lot more haunting realizing this is what Miles could have become if the spider wasn't accidentally sent to his universe. And one detail I love is how, remember how at the end of the first movie when the spider people were getting their butts kicked because of the glitching because they were gone from their universe for a while? Well, here, it starts off with that with Miles, and then we see Gwen with all the spider people who have become friends with Miles over the course of these two movies going to save him to return the favor from the end of the first movie. It's a really nice callback. So that's Across the Spider-Verse, and it's fantastic. Easily my favorite movie of the year so far, and I can't wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse whenever that comes out. So yeah, this movie is nothing short but outstanding. Now I'm just wondering how Beyond the Spider-Verse could top this. Even if it doesn't, and it's still on the same level of quality as this in the first movie, then we could have easily the best superhero trilogy of all time. And not just that, one of the best movie trilogies of all time. So, that's all I gotta say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know this took a long time to make, but please, I hope you enjoy, and make sure to like and subscribe for more videos. And let me know what you thought of this movie in the comments below. See you guys next time. Bye.